Thanks for attending our Save Our Science event. We're very happy that you're here. And of course, the first hour will be the panel, and then we'll have the speed mentoring and the networking tables or sessions. So this is Mary Kennedy, in case I'm sure I didn't say it, but I'm going to be here very briefly now and then at the end of the panel. So I am introducing our fantastic panel moderator, Ellen Kuwana. So she's got a master's degree and she's an award-winning science writer and editor. So she trained in neuroscience at UCSF for more than 20 years, and she was part of biomedical research teams that are federally funded. And so she knows what we're talking about today. And that was at the University of Washington and Seattle Children's Research Institute. She's a nationally recognized expert in science communication who has expertise in plain language and inclusive language. Ellen has written and edited more than 500 scientific articles and NIH grant proposals totaling more than $89 billion in awards. She gives talks on science communication careers. She did that for us here in Seattle, and it went really well. AI tools and writing manuscripts and grants. And she runs her own freelance business, Kiwanis Consulting. So with that, I will exit and leave it to our panel. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary. It is such a pleasure and honor to be here. I'm a little bit intimidated because you'll hear some of these bios, and there are some really amazing people here today to share their thoughts with you. So I want to do the introductions. We have Colette Delawala with us today. She's a PhD student in clinical psychology at Emory University. She founded and is the executive director of the nonprofit organization Stand Up for Science, which has organized rallies all over the U.S. and the world since February 2025 in response to the Trump administration's attack on our scientific institutions. With a team of more than 100 volunteers, Stand Up for Science has organized more than 30 official rallies on March 7th this year, with nearly 150 satellite demonstrations happening in cities across the U.S. and around the world. We also have today Alyssa or Allie Sinclair, who is a postdoctoral scholar at the University of Pennsylvania. She's going to be assistant professor at Rice University next year. Congratulations. Dr. Sinclair is a cognitive neuroscientist and a psychologist who studies learning and behavioral change, applying these insights to behavioral interventions and mass communication campaigns. With project co-lead Joshua Weitz, she led the development of a new data visualization resource called the Science and Community Impacts Mapping Project. SciMap aims to communicate the economic impacts of the cuts to research funding in the U.S. and empower individuals and policymakers to make informed action. So thank you for Allie and for joining us. Next, we have neurophysiologist Kirsten or Kiki Sanford, who is the co-founder and executive vice president at the Association of Science Communicators, of which I am a member. Dr. Sanford earned her PhD in molecular, cellular, and integrative physiology from UC Davis. And for more than 20 years, she has produced and hosted radio and television programming with companies such as PLOS ONE, WNBC, and the Science Channel Discovery Communications, which is why I'm a little bit nervous, more nervous than usual about moderating. And since 1999, she's hosted the radio show This Week in Science, which started as a radio show and is now the longest running female-owned science podcast. So thank you, Kiki, for all that you do in the science communications world. And then our final panelist is Adriana Bankston. She's an advocate for scientific research and innovation at the federal level. So she's working in the government as a congressional policy fellow. She works to support sustained federal research funding in the U.S. House of Representatives. And in recognition of her work supporting scientific research in the U.S., she was awarded the inaugural ARIS Emerging Broader Impacts Leader Award, the Sigma Chi Mantle Next Generation Women's Leadership Award, and the Top 20 in 2022 Award for Excellence in Advocacy from the Advocacy Association. Dr. Bankston earned her PhD in biochemistry, cell, and developmental biology from Emory University. So with that, welcome everybody. And again, thank you for being here. We're going to do about an hour of questions and we're going to kind of rotate amongst our speakers. Feel free to drop comments and connect in the chat. And then we'll have some time for questions when we do the meet the panelists and the networking after this. So starting with Colette, And then moving on to Adriana, can we talk a little bit and help explain how science in the US has benefited from major research infrastructure since World War II, and how this infrastructure positively affects public and global health as well as STEM research?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you guys so much for having me on today. I'm really excited to be here. So, after World War II, the government and the public understood this really unique opportunity for the United States to sort of rise up out of the victory of World War II as also a champion of science. There was this sort of shifting of global power happening, and there was this very obvious and recognized opportunity that the United States took advantage of, and there was this understanding that if there, if tax dollars were invested to create this scientific ecosystem, we really could be the drivers of progress in technology, in healthcare, and had the opportunity to sort of take over this position on the global stage. And I think that there was also this push for understanding that, the European like powerhouse of sort of the intellectual powerhouse of the world was really in shambles, and the US really saw this as an opportunity to rebuild over here. And so they took that opportunity, and I mean we're using technology right now on this call that was the result of that opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you. Adriana?
Yeah, so I wanted to follow that up a little bit, a bit of history. I'm sure you've all heard of Vannevar Bush. He was an engineer and actually the first ever science advisor to a US president, Franklin Roosevelt. He really championed scientific research and wanted to see the benefits of it happen also after the war, right? So he was a strong advocate for government funding for basic research across different sectors, and also universities, colleges, and research institutes, and so on. He really, importantly, I think for today's conversation, also championed training a next generation of scientific talent. And his text, maybe we can share this in the chat, The Endless Frontier, was submitted to President Harry Truman, which eventually essentially made the case for creating a new agency supporting basic research, which became the NSF in 1950. So that's really, instrumental for our American history, and I think keeping this framing in mind as to how this is going to hopefully frame the discussion today from where we came from.
Absolutely. And we can talk a little bit later also about NSF, the National Science Foundation, and then we also have NIH, the National Institutes of Health, which comprise a lot of different institutes and centers that people don't realize. There's National Heart, Lung, Blood, there's Child Health Development, genetics, all of that. So it's a very, very broad infrastructure, which has really made the US a powerhouse, and the proven economic returns on that investment have been shown over a lot of research over a lot of years. So I think that's very important to give that foundation and that kind of global setting for our federal institutions. And we can also talk a little bit more about how that de-risked science, because companies don't want to invest in things if they're not going to make a return, a profit, that's sizable. So the government stepped in with some of this more basic research that we find out a lot of information from. So let's move on a little bit and talk about how specific agencies have been affected by these funding cuts that have started happening since January, and sort of an update looking back from January to now. What's the current situation? And we're going to start with Adriana and then go to Ali after that.
Yeah, so I guess I'll give you a few numbers that I thought would be useful for folks to conceptualize really what the cuts look like in different agencies. So in the President's FY26 budget request, proposes quite a large percentage of cuts to a number of agencies, which you probably have heard of. But so going back to NSF, it's 55%, 37% for National Institutes of Health. NOAA also cut by 24%, EPA by 54%, and then NASA science arm by 46%, Department of Energy Office of Science by 14%, which is less, but still significant. So it's really impacting, really, as Alan said, all of our science agencies that are playing a role here, and multiple types of institutions where scientists are training, as we'll talk about later. So if this budget is enacted, we really risk losing an entire generation of scientists, and we already are seeing many that are contemplating or have left or are leaving to go to other countries and other places, are recruiting talent from here. One silver lining is that the Supreme Court has sort of started to take action in blocking some of these cuts, reinstating some of the grant funding. One recent example is NIH grant freezes to Columbia were lifted, but then reversed. And so this just speaks to the chaos of what's going on. But there is some pushback. Hopefully, we can push back on some of this. And then also some of the staff at NSF, for example, have been laid off and then rehired. So I think, maybe keeping some of this in mind, a bit of the silver lining, some things are sort of coming back now to an extent.
Yeah. And okay, moving on. I think Ali was next. And maybe if you can give a little bit of foundational knowledge about what the NSF does versus what the NIH does.
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to talk about both what's going on with the NIH and NSF, and we're actually seeing a lot of parallels between those two in terms of the sources of cuts that we're seeing. So in addition to the sort of blanket percent reduction in budget that Adriana was describing, we are seeing a number of current and proposed losses as well. So both at the NSF and the NIH, we're seeing terminated grants, and those are sort of occurring in two different ways. One way is sort of a keyword search where the government has decided that a certain number of terms are ideologically not compatible with their goals right now. And so they're canceling grants that have these keywords somewhere in the grant, particularly in the title or the abstract. But another source of losses that we're seeing for specific grant terminations is targeting specific institutions like Columbia or Harvard. My institution, Penn, is also on that list. So these are cases where we're seeing sort of regardless of the topic of the grant, it's being canceled because the institution itself is sort of at odds with the government right now. But in addition to those terminated grants, which are ongoing, some of them have been overturned and reinstated, which is good to see, but many of them are still being canceled every day. But we're also seeing some other sources of losses. For example, there are some missed opportunities, both for NIH and NSF grants, where funds are sort of being frozen. Like the grant isn't terminated, and yet funds that should have been dispensed are not being released. And that makes it really challenging to proceed with these ongoing projects. Another concern is a proposal that would reduce both NIH and NSF funding for indirect costs of research. I'll just give a little bit of background for people who might not be familiar with it, but basically, if you get a grant awarded to your institution, you get a big chunk of it that's for the direct costs of research, like the actual materials you need, paying participants, the staff salaries for the people who are directly doing the work. But there's also funding for indirect costs, which covers facilities and administration, health and safety checks, and like large sort of infrastructure things that are shared across many labs and many research projects. And historically, that's been an investment in the government to make that kind of work possible, because it's not doable and not very efficient to have every lab try to duplicate those things on their own. We really need those shared resources. And there's a proposal to greatly reduce the funding that's given out for indirect costs of research, both for the NSF and NIH. That would impact every single grant, both the current ones that are out there now and every future grant moving forward. And this, for the NIH at least, has currently been blocked by a judge who issued a permanent injunction, but the Trump administration is already appealing it. And if you look at their new budget docs, you'll see that they're talking about it as if that's going to be going forward. So clearly they're still trying to move it forward, and we'll have to wait and see what happens with that source of loss.
Okay, thank you so much. Moving into, we started macro, global, and then sort of foundational knowledge. Moving even more granularly into the United States now, specific regions or disciplines that are going to be more affected by these cuts. We're going to drop in the chat some links for maps. And when I took a look last night, it's really stunning. Other than Walmart, and Boeing in Washington State, the largest employers in a lot of states are either universities, in particular the major university or healthcare systems, which are also closely aligned with medical research. A lot of the clinicians and physician scientists who work at hospitals and healthcare systems are also researchers at universities, either clinical research or more basic fundamental scientific research. So we're going to start with, Alyssa, and then go to Colette and then Adriana to answer this and talk about some of the impacts regionally.
Sure. I'll talk a little about which states we're seeing being particularly hard hit, but I also want to note that when we map out the losses that are resulting from all of these cuts, we see that nowhere is safe. Really, this is happening across the country in red states and blue states alike, and that includes urban and rural areas as well, because sometimes there are large research hubs that are not actually mapping onto major cities. But regarding the new budget cuts for FY26, we estimate that about 13 states will face over $1 billion in economic losses resulting from cuts to NIH funding. And that includes some blue states that might not be surprising to you, like California, New York, or Massachusetts, but also some red states like Texas, Florida, and Ohio. And there are some other types of cuts we show on the SciMap website, which I'll screen share in a little bit. When we look at those terminated grants or cuts to funding for indirect costs, we see some hotspots of losses that occur like in the Boston area, the Bay Area, Southern California, the North Carolina Research Triangle, and so on. And like I mentioned, I just want to note that these areas with high losses don't always map onto population centers. So for example, the Mayo Clinic has campuses in Minnesota, in Arizona, and Florida, and all of those are associated with huge economic losses because these are hotspots for medical research.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of Allie's point there too, that rural America stands to lose quite a lot in this, big bad deal that they've worked up. We will likely see funding dry up in places that really rely on every single dollar that they get in subsidization from the government. And this can be, for things like maintaining hospitals, subsidizing different health initiatives that are specific to underserved populations in rural America. And I think a sort of long-term area where we're going to see this really impact rural America is that the support for training scientists and medical professionals from those areas to hopefully go back to those areas, back to their hometowns, is drying up because we often don't think about rural America as falling within the like DEIA, initiatives, but oftentimes they do. They're first generation college students, or they live below the poverty line, and so it is important to remember that this is a very short term thing, and that hospitals will be impacted and specific health initiatives will be, and also we're going to see long term consequences for rural America as well.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add one additional point. So we talked about major universities, and really, some of these universities that have less resources are highly dependent on federal funds, right? So HBCUs and MSIs, tribal colleges and universities, where federal funding is really critical for their survival in many cases, given that that's really what they go by. They often don't have large endowments and depend heavily on tuition dollars. And so I wanted people to just keep that in mind, that while some larger schools may have other sources, these places where talent is coming from really are suffering because of lack of federal funds.
Yep, absolutely. And I read somewhere that 50%, in the US, we only have 50% of the healthcare professionals that we need right now in order to meet the needs of our population, which is why you're waiting a long time for your medical appointments. And if more people leave, it takes 8 years at the fastest, usually to train an MD, even more if they specialize, which, we need those neurosurgeons as well. So it's a big issue. And then with workforce development, the cuts to the NSF, that's a lot of the training of science teachers at secondary education level in colleges. And then the graduate students and people who've already gotten their PhDs, who are called postdocs, who are doing even more training to become independent researchers and well-rounded. So it has very large effects in our country. So thank you for that. Can we talk about maybe some of the resources that you all are finding helpful in terms of being able to track the changes that are going on and not becoming overwhelmed. We're going to start with Adriana and then go to Kiki.
Yeah, I can provide a few sort of pointers for federal resources. So the AIP FYI newsletter is really a great resource summarizing a lot of the federal things that are going on at different agencies and in Congress, events and job postings and other things. And so highly recommend subscribing to that and kind of keeping tabs on what's going on in the federal government. Also, if you're part of scientific societies, they often have newsletters, and a lot of them have, pushback against Trump and written their own letters. We can talk about that later, but those are ways to engage as well. And really, again, see if your society can help support you and the news that they share. I would also recommend, if you're at a university, looking at your government relations office. So their role is essentially to connect you to the government opportunities, to Congress, Capitol Hill, and the ways that you can advocate as well. So that's a great resource that a lot of folks forget about, that they do exist basically at every university, or at least most of the major ones. And then also, with my congressional hat, I will encourage you to contact your member of Congress, because they're there to support and listen to constituents and the concerns that you have. And we've certainly heard that from folks that I work with as well. So your member's office can also be a resource. Members often have newsletters as well. You can keep tabs on what they're working on and how they're supporting you. That's for me.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and then I can jump in with a few more of resources for everybody. Those were a lot of good ones, but if you really try to keep abreast of, that every once in a while, LinkedIn or Blue Sky kind of tracking of what people you trust are posting in these places, often you can do a 15-minute little scroll and find some really, really good resources. But generally, when I'm looking at things myself, I trust Science Magazine. They do a lot of great reporting right now. They're really keeping up on it. Wired is also doing some incredible reporting about the cuts and how things are doing. So you pick up a magazine, read about how AI is taking over all our jobs, and then, find out about the cuts to the government. Easy peasy. And then on top of that, let's see, I also was going to add Research America, Mary's Letters. It's a wonderful, wonderful weekly letter. Mary Woolley from Research America sends out, and it's a newsletter, lots of links, really great information, simplified so it's not overwhelming. And Liz Neely, who used to be executive director of Story Collider, now runs Liminal. And with Liminal, she has started a program that she's been doing called Meeting the Moment. And so you can look for her Meeting the Moment weekly newsletters that she breaks down. And then she has a crowdsourced tracking project, if you go to unbreaking.org, that is really wonderful because they're tracking all these very discrete aspects of impacts on the research community.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm so proud of the science journalism community, and Kiki and I sort of straddle both those worlds. It is really amazing. And I was going to say, if anybody on the call or wants to write a letter to the editor, that's a little different from an op-ed. That's more integrating your personal experience. And there's been
the McClintock letters, and there's a whole bunch of great efforts recently.
Yeah, to get these personal stories in local newspapers, because that's really where you have that level of trust that you're changing hearts and minds with the story. And journalist, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Jackie Banazinski talks about that. You can't, unfortunately, it's not facts that persuade people. It's the stories behind the facts. And when you pull, if you yank out mis and disinformation and leave a hole, you need to fill it with a story that they can remember. So I think that's incredibly important. Thank you for that, Kiki. And then, so some of these actions, I mean, when I talk to people about the cuts to funding, they say, but yes, there are all the lawsuits and it's going to reverse. And the analogy that I make, it's like, yes, there are lawsuits and yes, some of these things will be reinstated, but it's also as if this amazing, infrastructure, these buildings, and of course it's way beyond buildings, but for the metaphor to work, it's a wrecking ball that's been taken to it. And so it's not something that you can just flip a switch and start these studies again. And people don't realize that studies that were approved and grant funding that was approved 5 years ago, you get the payments every year, and research labs have gotten 4 payments, and then they didn't get the 5th one this year. So yes, it saved that money, but those 4 years are useless of data because you don't have the 5th year and you haven't completed your study. So I want to talk a little bit about what impacts cannot be reversed, and what is this like long-term effect that it's going to have on the future of science in the US. We are a powerhouse. So we're going to start with Ali and then move to Adriana.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ellen. I completely agree with your points about sort of the waste that happens when you've got a study that was going on for years and you've invested all of these resources, and now because funding gets pulled, you can't complete it, and so you might not be able to learn anything from that study, which is such a shame. But I think another thing that's important to note is that even if we could magically reverse these cuts right now, there's damage that's already been done in terms of lost jobs and lost opportunities for people, and I think that really could impact a generation of scientists. So we've seen that research staff in labs across the country have lost their jobs. A lot of people have been laid off from the NIH and the NSF. But we also saw this year that graduate school admissions were greatly reduced at many institutions. So they were taking in fewer PhD and MD PhD students because they normally need to provide funding. And right now universities feel like they can't commit to supporting people for 5 or more years that it normally takes to complete these programs. We also saw hiring freezes at many institutions. So that's for staff as well as for faculty. And that's a real problem for people like me who are on the job market, where it's really stressful to be trying to start your own lab and launch your career and find that the already scarce opportunities in academia are drying up because of these hiring freezes. So those are blocks sort of occurring at multiple career stages that can be really detrimental and sort of potentially push people out of science. And I hope that we can find a way to sort of hang on and still have new ways to create training opportunities for people. But even if we could undo these cuts now, those shifts have already occurred.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I really want to emphasize the impacts on the next generation of scientists and bringing this back to grad students and postdocs who are currently in science. Some of them, I've spoken to folks who are early on in their research careers, looking elsewhere, folks who are graduating and thinking about next steps. A lot of them really, are disillusioned really with American science and looking for jobs in other countries. As we talked about, they're being recruited elsewhere. But even earlier, right? So even undergrads, because I know some of the NSF REU programs are also cut that fund undergraduate research. And also I've spoken with high school students who are currently trying to figure out what to do, and they're interested in science. And, so really we're impacting a large scale of trainees at different stages, right? But really, think about what these young scientists are dealing with, and that we're going to lose this whole generation.
Yeah, it's incredibly sad.
Yeah, can I add I would love
Please
to add a
do.
comment here on top of this in terms of this pipeline, right? Of getting younger from children to teenagers to young adults, the whole pipeline through the interest in science to becoming part of the science industry community, research development, communication, whatever it is. There is through AAAS and a number of philanthropies, there is a movement or an initiative right now called the STEM Opportunity Alliance, and they are trying to bring together organizations working on different pillars that will basically create the foundation of an active and actually successful pipeline. And so this is funded not by government funding at this point in time. It's being privately and philanthropically funded, which is kind of where we are as the Band-Aid to make things move. And the interesting thing about this initiative is they're not looking at it as we're going to do something and it's going to be done in the next 3 to 4 years. They are trying to fund it and develop it in a way that they're looking long term. 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. Like, this is a long-term effort that is hopefully going to be slow, consistent effort to be able to mitigate any kind of damages that have occurred at this period in this particular moment in time. So I think that there are, these wonderful things that are going to hopefully help hold the pipeline together and keep it going. But like you said, as both of you said, getting into this, there is damage that's been done in the moment that's going to be hard to come back from for a period of time. But I think there's some, silver linings and some positive things that are still happening.
Yeah, and I think we need both. We need to recover the level of government funding that we had. And I'm so happy that philanthropy and different organizations and new ones such as Stand Up for Science are stepping up and organizing and galvanizing people and taking action. Another thing, researchers who are at universities, often there's tech transfer, science industry partnership offices that may have some resources. Sometimes they have bridge funding. Sometimes they can connect you with biotech and pharma and philanthropic organizations within your community. So that's an important resource to know about. But it's also interesting. I live in Seattle, and the Allen Institute, is privately funded for the most part. But I asked, and a third to 50% of their research is funded by federal grants, and you cannot quickly turn on the tap. It's not instantaneous, in terms of getting more robust philanthropic funding, but that is a very important piece of the puzzle that's happening now, which is very hopeful, and people want to know about these resources. So thank you, Kiki. So now we're going to turn to Allie and kind of let her shine for a moment. And I know she won't brag about herself, but she and Joshua Weitz created this really cool tool called SciMap. And so can you tell us a little bit about that resource and how scientists can share the information presented, and how we can involve getting friends and families to understand this, what science is and how much of an effect this is having?
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. I want to start first with a little bit of backstory about how this project came to be. Back during the COVID pandemic, I had this collaboration with Joshua Weitz, who's a professor at the University of Maryland, where we built several different public-facing interactive websites to try to better communicate the risk of COVID-19. So, for example, we helped people see the probability of encountering somebody who's infected with COVID in their local communities right now, today. Or we helped people try to understand what level of immunity they might have based on their prior experiences with infections and vaccines, and whether they should go get a booster dose. And we had a lot of success with doing this. I'm a psychologist and a neuroscientist by training, so we thought about how we can leverage what we know about learning, about memory, about beliefs and decisions to try to craft a way to communicate information that's more effective and engaging. And one thing that we found really effective is to focus on self-relevant information. So helping people see not just the big picture, but also how an issue that's going on will impact them in their own local communities. So we took the same idea here. In this website, we call it SciMap, which stands for the Science and Community Impacts Mapping Project. You can find it at scienceimpacts.org. This is our little welcome message. We provide a bit of overview about what the NIH is and what it does. An important factoid here is that investing in the NIH is a really good idea. So NIH funding boosts the economy. There's a great return on investment of about 250%. So for every dollar that you invest in NIH, it generates about $2.56 in return in terms of new economic activity. And it's really sort of bolstering local economies. But because of these cuts, we're going to see losses that result from terminated grants, as well as from these sort of blanket budget cuts that we've been discussing, and the cuts to funding for research infrastructure, those indirect costs. So the goal of this website is to show people what those cuts look like and how they will impact their local economies. So on the main page here, we're looking at cuts that result from terminated grants, as well as from cuts to the indirect cost rate. So here I'm just clicking this location button to zoom into my local area. I'm in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania. So you can see here what's going on in Philly. You'll see that the current loss, it's the number of terminated grants and the economic losses that result from it. We're seeing already about $41 million of economic losses and 177 jobs lost. And in terms of annual future loss, so if that change to the indirect costs went through, we would see losses of $322 million every year recurring as long as that policy were in effect. And you'll also notice these blue bubbles. If you click on these, you can see information about the terminated grants, the number of grants canceled, and the dollar amount per institution. You can see these across the whole country. And these are being updated every day. So we are drawing data as it's coming into Grants Watch, and we are plotting it on this map. And zooming out here, I also want to note that you can change the view. So in addition to the county level, you can look at your state, which can be helpful for getting quick facts about the impact to your state. And you can also select congressional districts and get information about, say, who your representative is. And you can actually go then share out that information. So this tells you, who you should be contacting, and you can tell them how much their local area is going to be hurting because of this. And so you can really speak out as a constituent. I want to note a few other tabs that we have on this website. So we've just released this today, actually. This is a map showing the losses that would result from this budget change, so the FY26 proposed budget. You'll notice the color mapping is a little bit different. We're focusing on House districts here. And here, if we say look at Massachusetts, you can see that we're also showing a breakdown of losses that would result for specific research areas. So here we're focusing on aging, cancer, and infectious disease research. And these are largely being driven by huge budget cuts that we're seeing specifically to some institutions like the National Institute on Aging. So this is a similar idea here. I'll also note that we have a written report. You can click to download it here. This has about a page, like a little white paper of text where we summarize some of the regions where you'll see the biggest impacts and what we can do about it, because it's not too late to stop it. This budget has not yet been approved by Congress. If you're interested, you can learn more. We've got more information here. And I want to note that the content on this Learn More page was crafted for a general audience. We've done multiple online experiments with online participants where we show them this information as sort of a text-based intervention, or we have them use the map and we measure their change in attitudes, change in their endorsement of these cuts, or how much they are willing to take action, like by contacting their representatives. So everything that you see here has been pretty extensively and empirically validated to try to make it as effective as it can be. We've also got an interactive quiz where you can choose your state. Oops, that's a password filler. You can choose your state, and you can try to guess the amount that would be lost due to grants or indirect costs and get some feedback. We've got a take action page where you can get some facts that can help you for contacting your representatives, and you can share out the website to others, like on social media. And finally, on our About page here, you can find some nitty-gritty details about our methods, how we're calculating this, a log about updates, and you can also contact us. One final thing that I want to mention, and it's part of why this map looks like a beefsteak, as somebody put in the chat, we are doing something special with the way that we're plotting this data. And that is that we're accounting for commuter flows. So people don't always live where they work. And oftentimes you'll see that at a university or a research hospital, for example, it is supporting tons of people, many, many jobs flowing out into surrounding counties and surrounding communities. So it's really having a diffuse effect. And when we think about the losses that are happening, it's important to not just focus on the pinpoint of where it's happening. So if you look in the media, a lot of the stories that we see are focusing on how elite, private, wealthy institutions like Harvard are being targeted with canceled grants. But the truth is that communities across America, including state schools and rural communities, are going to be harmed by these cuts. And so we take those point level data points about those losses that are occurring, and we use census data on where people live and work to proportionally spread it around along those commuter flows. And we end up with a map that looks like this, that is more representative of how these cuts will actually impact Americans.
Great, thank you. And all of this information that you're drawing the data from are publicly available data on canceled NIH, NSF.
Yes. Yep. And you can
funding.
find that information about our data sources on the About page. And this is all publicly available data. One other thing I forgot to mention is that we have a recent perspective piece about this map and what we can do about it that came out in Nature Human Behavior. So please feel free to check that out if you want to.
And that's behind a paywall. So maybe we'll be able to share that.
Yes. Yeah, I do have a PDF copy that I'm happy to circulate. Yeah.
Okay. Because I did go to look at that last night. Okay. In the interest of time, thank you so much, Allie. That's amazing. And when I think of like my daughters who are trying to go to grad school, what you've accomplished while you're in grad school is wonderful. So
I am a postdoc, but thank you.
Oh, you're a postdoc.
Yeah.
You're a postdoc. Sorry, getting people confused. Okay. still very, very impressive. And thank you so much for all that you're doing. Okay, this is from one of our attendees on the call. What is Congress doing to fight back against the cuts and hold the Trump administration accountable? What is being done inside Congress to reverse the funding cancellations that have happened this year? Are the cuts to NSF and NIH reversible? We've kind of alluded to that part a little bit, but kind of what is being done to oppose these actions? We're going to start with Adriana and then go to Colette.
Sure. So, well, this is a big question, so I can't speak for the whole of Congress nor my office specifically. But I can tell you a few things that we've been working on. So one is, NSF, obviously, they celebrate a 75th anniversary in May. So there's been a lot of activity around that, legislatively and letters. We co-wrote a resolution to celebrate the agency's anniversary, have led on 2 NSF letters to the administration expressing concerns with cuts and also firings at NSF, which were highly popular and signed by many members. And so trying to do what we can from where we are right now. I also want to point out what committees are doing. So again, I know more about the House side of things, but House Science Committee has also done a number of actions in terms of oversight and letters from their side. So I encourage you to check those out and see what they're doing. Many members, including my boss, have spoken on the House floor multiple times since this administration started to oppose the cuts. And interestingly, currently, House Science Committee is also conducting a survey, which I encourage you to fill that out, to talk more about the impacts. And it only goes to their staff and has different filters there, so you don't have to disclose everything. So it's, multiple of these surveys have been conducted, but that one's really good, I think, to check out. So I guess want to, emphasize this fact that Congress is fighting back. We're doing what we can through the different mechanisms that we have, whether it's legislation, letters, or speeches and other things. As we sort of alluded to this already, a federal judge has already blocked some of these cuts. Some of them may be temporary and have been reversed as well, as we talked about. So it's still chaos, but I think there's maybe a bit of silver lining. One thing, going back to NSF, because the GRFP program, funds a lot of trainees that are really promising and have used this program to launch their careers in science. So a few months ago, the program was cut down from about 2,000 to 1,000 or so, about half. And so recently, NSF added another 500, so now it's 1,500, which is a bit of a nice thing to see that something is coming back. So I think, again, a lot of students will benefit from that.
Thank you. Okay, now we do go to Colette, who is our grad student.
Yes. I will also apologize because the train is going past my house right now, so you might hear that. It's that time of the evening. I just wanted to add on, first of all, I don't have much to add to that, but the one thing that I will add on is we did see that, RFK was subjected to a pretty intense hearing today by the Appropriations Subcommittee. And, Jay Bhattacharya also went through a hearing, I believe, 2 weeks ago. He's being called forth for another one. So in addition to, the floor time that's happening, the different committee meetings that are happening, it is nice to see these like subcommittee hearings happening, and they're not being delicate, which I think is good, and I definitely personally would like to see more of. So
Yep, agree. And then Adriana, did you talk about the Research America, that part, sort of these trade organizations and other science organizations, in addition to AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science? What other organizations should be mentioned here that maybe we can help support their efforts?
Yeah, sure. So as we sort of alluded to this, many different organizations and societies are writing their own letters opposing the cuts. The Research America letter, I think, is particularly pertinent and has a lot of signers. And they have focused on NIH from the budget request as well, proposing an $18 billion cut to the NIH budget. So I know we've been talking about NSF mostly, but NIH is obviously really important. Also proposes consolidating and eliminating institutes and centers from the NIH. And so it's really something to look at and sign on to if your organization is on this call and listening right now. I also, wanted to point out that a lot of leaders have spoken on this. Organizations coming from outside, including the AAA CEO Sudip Parikh, who testified, I think, both in front of House Science and Senate Commerce. Something to watch as well, because he's really good at talking broadly about science, why it matters, and urging policymakers to take action. One other useful resource has been a webinar from FABS, which is sort of a coalition of societies that has organized a webinar to particularly help folks that have had NSF grants terminated and try to fight back, but also learn more about it. And I think this center counted to about 1,600 grants when the webinar happened in May. So this is also encouraging to see that organizations are organizing their own events like this where faculty and other folks can join and listen in. And then also a number of organizations, including AAU, ACE, and APLU, filed a joint lawsuit, which you probably have seen, to, again, fight against the cuts. And then also specifically seeking to halt an attempt to cut the NSF facilities and administrative F&A cuts, or indirect costs, which are really important for research to continue as well. So it's really nice to see these efforts. Again, a lot of these actually have been highlighted in the AIP newsletter, going back to that.
Okay.
Yeah, something to keep in mind.
And we'll drop
community.
some of those links in, like FABs I haven't heard of. So we'll drop some of those links in. Okay. Thank you. Sorry to cut you off. We're going to move on to Colette, who's going to talk a little bit about Stand Up for America, but I want to also call people's attentions to the chat, and we'll collate these and hand these out to somebody sharing NACHO, which I always want to say Nacho, but I have edited environmental health for 9 years. So it's NACHO. Public health, there are some very good resources, and we'll get to Kiki a little bit more later, that public health is really good about communicating things in plain language. But I do want to move to Colette and sort of shine a spotlight on her and her efforts with Stand Up for Science. So please walk us through what motivated you to do this, what's next for the movement, what's been going on, and how we can take action.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stand Up for Science was started in February 2025. So February 8th was the day that I posted on Blue Sky. I really had this clarity basically on January 20th at about noon, once those executive orders started being signed, that we were headed in a really bad direction. And I was really sort of discontent with like the lack of leadership. I was super surprised that we weren't seeing people like rioting in the streets already. I know I was just like calling friends, I was messaging friends, keeping an eye on Twitter and Blue Sky to try to see like where there were, rallies. Was there a protest? I was ready to buy a plane ticket, and just wasn't seeing anything, and really felt like we needed to take some strong action. Like it was such a black and white thing to me that it's like we have to do something, and nobody was doing anything. And there was really this moment of be the change you want to see in the world. And I know that is so cliche, but I don't have any activist experience outside of this. I am a mom, I'm an addiction scientist, I'm a grad student. I just came off of polishing off into candidacy, and didn't really need another project, but it seemed really important to take a stand and to live my values, to be completely frank with you. And so we posted on Blue Sky. It went just viral. I mean, pretty immediately. The response was huge. Within 48 hours, we had a leadership team of 5 of us in total. And, we ended up I thought there would be like 500 people in Washington, D.C. somewhere, yelling, and then we'd go home and we'd feel better, etc. We did 172 rallies across the world. We had thousands. Oh, someone sung. We had thousands of people turn out, and really, we were the first large-scale mobilization in the Trump's second presidency, and I'm pretty proud about that. Since then we've turned this like movement into an organization. So we're a 501c3 and 501c4 organization. We have launched the Summer Fight for Science, which is this summer campaign targeted at all of these funding cuts. The fiscal year 2026 budget, the possibility of a like pocket rescission situation, and the reconciliation bill that they're trying to push through. We've got this ground game. We're trying to get scientists out of the lab into their communities, engaging with their communities in this like small format, really like simple, easy way, and to just show the public that like professors aren't evil. Like we're not these evil people, sitting there trying to steal public money. Like we're just people who want to try to help others and learn something along the way. So yeah, and then as we move forward, we want to be a player in the primary and midterm elections. Our goal is to make sure that we have pro-science elected officials in the on Capitol Hill, and so my hope is that you'll start seeing some Stand Up for Science ads here on your like YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and stuff soon. So that's where we're headed.
Awesome. And lots of resources in the chat. I'm going to turn it over to Kiki now.
Oh, straight to me. All right. Yes. I was going to say, coming from Stand Up for Science, there was an organization, Science Debate, that was working for a very long time to try and get scientific issues into the presidential and candidate debates for a long time. And so sciencedebate.org is another one if they're still going. So from the perspective of going out into your communities and how you talk about science and where and who you're talking to, I work with the Association of Science Communicators to create a hub for science communicators. And within the science or academic community, there's kind of this idea that, anybody can do SciComm. And yes, anybody can do SciComm, but not everybody does it in a way that is responsible and actually effective. And there is a long history of, COVID was great for it, long history of jumping in with your facts and just expecting people to understand and believe, but not having any understanding of who the people were, what their motivations are, what context you're coming into, what kind of what kind of thinking processes they have. And so the intent of getting into communities is absolutely essential. And that is something that scientists have not done very well. There is I'm going to give a talk, come to me. It's kind of the, field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. No, they're not going to. You have to go to where they are. And you don't start talking first. You figure out who they are and become a part of the community before you start the conversation. There was a question in the chat about should we use sports analogies, and how do we bring that up, and would that work? Well, if you're talking to somebody who loves sports and maybe is really into like basketball stats or whatever, they're going through March Madness and it seems to be the right time, use a sports analogy. Imagine what would happen if all the people on this particular team were on the bench for whatever reason. What if they were all injured, or because they didn't get certain treatments because our public health infrastructure has been torn apart? Maybe what if they all are sick and dying and we can't have basketball? Like, that's the analogy that you can get to, but you take the moment to get there to get to know the person before you start talking about it. And so on the other side of it, it's what group is it? Who are you talking to? Remember that just because you're a scientist doesn't mean that people have to listen to you. And we are in a post-truth world where facts don't matter. And Google facts and cherry-picked information is, opinions are as important as your decades of experience and training. And so we have to reassess our mindset when we come into our communication situations. We have to reassess where we are, where the world is, who we're talking about, and we need to check our ego at the door to try and get that information through. I have so many more things to say, but I mean, yeah. So
Yes.
I try to practice this on my podcast, This Week in Science. Trying to build curiosity and get people to be interested enough to want to take the next step to learn more on their own. And we have conversations about what's happening with funding and where things are going at this particular moment in time so that people understand. David Schiffman wrote an article just this last week in The American Scientist about, I think it's called, Why Are We Funding This? And he breaks down the whole funding model, and it gives really good examples of how to talk to people about why or how certain things are funded. And, getting back to the idea of like funding basic science, I mean, that's the hard one, right? It's not applied. It doesn't have an instant thing. It's going to be going back to it. It goes back to that curiosity, wanting to know about the world and figure things out. And maybe it'll give us a better iPhone. Maybe it'll give us technology that's actually sustainable to help us with our climate change issues. So you have to go to the level of curiosity, awe, wonder, try and find people in those places. And if you are interested, try and get science communication training. The Association of Science Communicators has training programs, but there are lots of others. Alan Alda Foundation Institute, ComSciCon for grad students. There's, I think, a lot of universities like Columbia and others have training programs, but Association of Science Communicators is trying to create the hub that ties people together and organizations together so that you can find these resources more easily. We have our annual conference, usually in the spring, Science Talk, if you're interested. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I'll
Kiki.
come.
And
I'll come talk to.
come
I have
back
so
to
much.
you.
I'll come
come
talk
back
to
to you.
people if you want me to.
And I would say that, like, Kiki and I go to
I wanna help.
scientific conferences, and we're trying to connect the science communicators more closely with science policy. I went to grad school with Christine Mirzayan, who has a science policy fellowship named after her, and with researchers to help you communicate. So there are people out there who know how to do this well and really want to work with scientists, myself included. So in the interest of time, we're going to talk a little bit about talking to friends and family, and we're going to talk with Kiki a little bit more. I just want to see, Adriana, do you have anything you want to add to that last topic, or can we kind of let Kiki talk for just a few minutes about Association of Science Communicators?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. So, Kiki, this is your big question. You've been podcasting for 26 years on This Week with Science. You're co-founder of Association for Science Communicators, which I have loved going to the conferences every year and chatting with people and making connections with Oregon Public Broadcasting and science communicators at NASA. So if you in just a few minutes really want to kind of download some resources and programs, if people do want to get that science communication training, where do you point people?
So for some of our programs, we've got, go to the associationofsciencecommunicators.org. We have courses and trainings that are available. And additionally, the hub that we are developing is by science communicators for science communicators. And so there is also, if you would like to help the community by teaching a course or offering a workshop, we have the ability for people who are science communicators to bring their knowledge to the community to help foster the community. We are also working on initiatives because this moment in time is really pivotal as the funding in research and development is being cut. Because if you know about broader impacts, the NIH, NSF grants, you need to have your broader impact statement. Very often that is the science communication part of what you're doing, or you say it's, the articles that I'm writing or whatever. But in truth, science communication is its own it is its own discipline, and it is something that should be sustainably funded in some way that is not necessarily tied to the funding that comes through these grants, which are now being taken away. And so as we see the area I work in, like with my podcast, the funding for the people who are not just in the universities, but outside the universities is going away. The funding that was once available for people outside who are independent trainers to come in and train scientists on science communication is going away. So it is removing and minimizing the opportunity and availability for scientists, and even the pathway for additional career options from science to science communication. It's declining. And so there is an initiative we're working on. We're trying to bring together institutions and universities across the United States to try and develop and work with ongoing efforts to develop curriculum standards for science communication and certification programs, so that they also trying to work with universities to institutionalize SciComm training into graduate school programs. So it's part of your degree program and not just an add-on that you do by yourself, because that's nice. So it's because of the importance, we are pushing forward initiatives for professionalizing the field, improving the pathways to be trained and understand how to do science communication better for all scientists, academics, whatever, and also try and figure out business models. How do we make science communication and science? Because the more we talk about science more effectively and connect science and society in a more integrated, collaborative, cooperative way, the better and more resilient and sustainable science becomes.
Absolutely
You
agree.
can't have one without the other.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm doing.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to try to power through 4 questions in about 4 minutes, which is not possible, but we'll just start talking faster. We can do it. So we have a brain drain that's starting to happen where, Germany, France, other countries are accepting our scientists. Adriana and Colette, what can be done to stop this brain drain?
Yeah, well, I think that there are sort of these two ways of looking at it. So I don't know if there's a degree of a brain drain that I don't know if we're going to stop. However, I do think that there's one thing to be said here, that there aren't enough resources overseas in other countries to support all of the scientists in the United States at the level that we are, and not everybody can pick up their lives and move. And so there is I think that part of the ethos of Stand Up for Science is that yes, there are people that they do legitimately need to go live in a safer place, and I do understand that. And at the same time, our house is burning down and we are going to have to rebuild. And so I do think there is also this opportunity for a better, more just, more beautiful science on the other side of this. And part of that means sort of inspiring people that there is this opportunity and that all is not lost.
Thank you. Adriana?
Sorry. What I wanted to say is, I want to encourage young scientists to keep talking to Congress and pitching their ideas. That's really important, and keep watching what's going on. We can really hear from you, and then also a lot of this I think comes down to universities as well, where a lot of these scientists are training, right? And so thinking about how we're treat them well, and make sure they feel like they belong in science, entice foreign scientists to come here, right? And so I wanted to point out one bill that we've been working on, which is called Keep STEM Talent, which is a bipartisan bill to support green cards for foreign scientists and students who are coming here. So I think a lot of this is being incorporated into what we're doing, in addition to what universities are doing, but Congress is also listening, again, to young scientists, and we've incorporated a lot of the ideas that we've heard from you into various things that we're doing. So keep coming to Congress.
Yeah, keep contacting Congress. So we're going to move to Kiki and then Adriana to talk about, this was a registrant question from one of the attendees. What opportunities are there right now in this uncertain time? When I give talks about transferable skills. Some people are not going to grad school or they've already gotten their PhD and they're going to go to med school because there aren't jobs out there right now. So what areas of opportunity maybe are there, and where can people move to? Kiki?
There is a huge opportunity for people who are knowledgeable in different fields. Like you said, that technology transfer is essential. And one of the things in the Association of Science Communicators that we are really trying to do is broaden the acceptance of the term "who is a science communicator." So if you're a gardener and you can talk about like the soil pH and seasonal aspects of how different plants grow well in different places, that is science communication. And so it's taking like this framing mindset of what you can do, what you do in the lab. You're a writer, you're a project manager, you are a troubleshooter, a problem solver, you are creative. And so these are all various things. Maybe all sorts of software. And there are, tech companies, marketing companies, there are startups, there's biotech, there are so many opportunities for science-related jobs, and sometimes it's not even specifically science. So keep your eyes open because they are there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think some of the industries, to piggyback on that, where these opportunities exist, right? So industry and biotech, a lot of folks from science are going into these positions, but also government and public service, right? Folks who are in science and using their expertise in policy and government. Obviously, nonprofits, and a lot of them are specific to particular policy topics, right? Like climate or Alzheimer's disease or something like that, where your interests that are niche can really play a role in a nonprofit that's really specific to that area. We sort of alluded to this when we started that, I would also look at organizations that are funded by philanthropy, right? So that's something that, can compensate some of this, may provide for more stability if you're looking at jobs right now. But then also positions that focus on teaching, technical writing, and again, tech transfer and these sorts of things. So opportunities do exist besides the traditional path that you can look at.
Nice. Thank you. And that kind of dovetails with, advice for newly graduated scientists seeking entry-level positions to look widely and think about all these transferable skills you have. It may be project management and you go in the tech sector for a little bit and then try to get back into more like biotech, project management, and then back into science. It may be, it used to be you couldn't go to industry and come back into academia. I think that line is going to soften given the time. So to wrap it up, I just want to kind of do a round robin with everybody, and let's end with some positive thoughts, action items, recommendations. So we'll go Colette, Kiki, Adriana, and Allie, and then we're done.
Yeah, sounds good. So one thing I like to put my clinical psychology hat on for this. My activism is very informed by my science. And one thing that I like to sort of tie in is that the moments when you feel the most like isolated, paralyzed, overwhelmed, alone, which is sort of this flood the zone tactic that the Trump administration uses that we are all presently experiencing, the moment that you feel like the worst is the moment that you should act the most. And so anytime you're feeling that sense of overwhelm, I like to think about it as like, here's your menu of action. Like, is today a protest day or is it a call your congresspeople day? Is it a sign a petition day or is it a plan a teach-in day, right? And pick an action every day when you're feeling overwhelmed with all the crap that's going on and do it. And in that, you will be empowered. You will feel this sense of community because you'll realize you're not the only person fighting. And so I say that to make the point that action is cumulative, and there isn't just one protest that's going to fix everything. There isn't one petition that's going to fix everything, but it all adds up. And if we are all fighting, even if we're fighting just a little bit every single day, that is a huge wave of change. And the only reason we ever have to throw in the towel is if we decide to stop fighting. And so don't stop fighting. Hang in there.
Nice.
And to follow up on that, I think you're right, Colette. But if you are the type of personality that overwhelm can lead to too much and it can lead to burnout, just make sure you're taking care of yourself. So do the things, but also do the things for yourself. Mental health breaks, take time. It's okay if you take a day off. It's okay if you take a week off. Just do what you need to do to be able to keep going. And one of the biggest things also is local community, not just community. We all find social media, whatever, I'm connected to these people, and you can find people like you, and that's wonderful. But when it comes to really feeling connected, find those people that you can go have a little coffee talk with, right? Try and find a way to be locally connected, and maybe that'll lead to more local actions and real change, because this is all going to change local first. We change locally, it'll ripple globally.
Nice. Thank you. Next. Who do we
Yeah,
have?
and from
Sorry, am
sorry.
I next?
Adriana,
Okay.
then Allie.
Sorry.
Yeah, so from where I currently sit, I do want to encourage you that policy can be a good way to get involved and take action and impact science. You can really use your scientific skills in public service, policy positions, and also want to encourage you again and tell you Congress is on your side. We're fighting the good fight and doing what we can. Keep coming to us and telling us about your experiences. And I'm hoping that eventually we'll start to recover from this crisis, as we're starting to see a bit of that here and there. Because I think America is still one of the superpowers in science, and there is a reason why it's the greatest country, hope still is, for science, with so many Nobel Prize winners and our impact on the global stage. So don't give up the fight. I'll second that too.
Absolutely. Allie?
To end on a positive note here, your voice matters a lot more than you might think. So a lot of my research focuses on belief and behavior change and how information and ideas can spread through social networks. So for example, in some of my work on climate change, we think about an idea called pluralistic ignorance, which is the idea that we tend to underestimate how much other people agree with us. We don't realize that other people share the same opinions, the same fears, and so we might be afraid to speak up because we think that we're alone. But when we start speaking up, we change those social norms and we show people, everyone around us, what we're thinking, and they realize that they're not alone either. And so this can have a really sort of cumulative downstream effect, like a snowball rolling downhill, where you might share information and somebody else thinks, hey, I was thinking that privately, and here's somebody who had the courage to say it out loud, and they want to do the same. And so we see that spreading, in social networks, on social media platforms, in person through conversations, by changing norms, reaching congressional representatives and so on. And so you can sort of be the first push to that snowball.
And I would just like to say I found the chat incredibly useful as well, thinking about sports analogies. Imagine if 80% of the high school and college football programs were canceled, what would the NFL draft look like in 6 years? I think that's really useful. That's something that most people can understand. But again, it goes back to knowing your audience and listening as much as you're talking to find out what resonates with them. What are they interested in? How can you make this all accessible to them? Answer the so what, give examples, tell stories, bring it down to the human element. And with that, 5calls.org, all these action items, we'll be putting some resources out on LinkedIn, all of us. I want to thank the panelists sincerely. I mean, wow, has this been a roller coaster since January, but I'm so grateful to have all of your voices in my head as this reassuring voice of this is what we can do and this is what we have to do. Science is worth fighting for. It's important at so many levels, including biomedical research, science education, the next generation of informed voter populace, and people making good decisions for the health of their loved ones. I also really want to thank Mary for organizing this. I'm going to turn it back to her, but really check out Biotech Networks. Connect with all of us on LinkedIn. That's really what I'm doing to kind of fight some of this doom and gloom, is really staying connected with people and amplifying their voices. And that just gives me so much joy. Mary, take it away. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you so much to all the panelists and all of you who attended. And the event isn't over, but I would share what the panelists said. If you can find a purpose in, helping others, it really, and, it helps others, A, and B, it helps you feel better. So you have a few options now. If you go over to the left and click on sessions, there'll be a meet the panelists session, career development, recruiting and hiring managers, consulting and entrepreneurs, or career transitions. So these are just like a Zoom call, and you kind of get what you get. You'll be able to see how many people are there. You can have the camera on or off. And of course, I think most of the panelists will be there. We've all got, busy lives, and some of the panelists are on the East Coast. So, and we'll also expect them probably to go take a bio break. So give them a little bit of time. And then you can also, if you signed up to be either a mentor or a mentee, you can go to the networking tab on the left, and you will be paired with either a mentor or a mentee. And in the event chat, I've put the mentor mentee guide. And thanks again to everyone. We had about between 70 and 80 attendees at the panel. And so looking forward to seeing you. I'll hop on to a few of the sessions. So thanks for the panelists, and thanks everyone. Let's keep fighting.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.